Welcome again. I'm Teresa Downey from NOFA, New Hampshire. I'm the Transition to Organic Partnership Program Coordinator. For short, it's called TOP, and at NOFA, New Hampshire. We're here tonight with Caitlin Porter, and this is our Farmer Roundtable series that is going through April. And tonight we're going to be talking about food hubs and aggregators and distributors. And the Farmer Roundtable series, it's monthly and it's a gathering for farmers, like I said, running through April. The focus is on market access in the Granite State. So each month, we highlight a different topic in building and expanding market access from retail, wholesale, and marketing, with organizations joining to share resources, answer questions, and connect directly with farmers. This meeting is hosted by the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire and funded by the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Caitlin is here tonight as she's the value chain coordinator at New Hampshire Food Alliance, and it's going to be a little bit of discussion style. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, or if there's a break in conversation, you're certainly just welcome to unmute and ask your question. I'm going to hand it right over to you, Caitlin.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa. Nice to see everyone here. Hey, Sarah, familiar face. Beth, I'm unfamiliar with you yet, but I'm sure we'll be more familiar in about an hour. I would love to maybe just start by doing a quick go around of introductions because we're a small group tonight and just get an idea of where you're calling in from, maybe what farm you're representing, and if there's anything in particular that you're interested in that got you to join tonight, so I can make sure to touch upon that. I would love that too. Um, Beth, you want to kick us off?
Hi. I just have a really small acreage, and I've just started growing some more orchard trees, and I've been looking for a farm for years. Um, so we haven't got to the part where I'm in production, and I'm always been looking for a farm. So this topic really sounded interesting because if I do get an abundance of a crop, I would like to be able to know how I can say get it to Hannaford, or what kind of ideas you have other than farmers market. So
Mm,
that'd be great.
great. Cool. Anyone else? Mike, are you there?
Sure. Mike Smith. I'm the state coordinator for New Hampshire Ag in the Classroom. I also work dually as a community agriculture guy for 4-H. Currently, one of the things we're working on is we're working with the New Hampshire Farm to School initiative
Hmm.
in trying to um, figure out how to get harvest of the month in the hands of more teachers and more teachers on board with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I've been working very closely with Laura over the last couple months as that transition's underway. So it's great to be connected to you.
Yeah, me and my partner Megan are kind of the education end of things.
Awesome. And Tuckaway Farm, I see a couple
I know there's a bunch
representatives.
of us. Yeah, Chuck and Laurel are here listening. And Beth and Mike, it's nice to meet you. I know Caitlin and Teresa. So we're Tuckaway Farm in Lee, New Hampshire, and um, we have had a farm store here for many, many years. But the reason I came on tonight, one, just because it's always great to check in with everybody, but secondly, because we're developing what's a small food hub at our farm, which is meant to serve multiple farmers and value-added producers. So we are growing from a smaller farm store into a collaborative market, and I'm working right now with a grant through the NASDA Business Builder grant to figure out the organizational structure of collaboratively marketing products so that we can offer a brick and mortar outlet similar to a farmer's market, but with an indoor space where the vendors own their product from start to sale, direct to consumer, But as a whole, as a membership structure of vendors, everybody's contributing into the overhead and administration. So really trying to get away from a store in which you're reselling and up marketing and into something that's sort of equitably owned and operated. So we're in the development of that right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. Well, thanks so much for that. That really helps. And so yeah, I just wanted to provide some information, considering tonight's theme is all about aggregators, food hubs, and distributors. We thought it'd be a good place to start to help to kind of break down the definition of each of those and provide some examples throughout the state that are actively doing those services for New Hampshire farms. So I'll start with aggregators. And it's interesting because as I was preparing for this presentation, when you Google food aggregator, it just refers to online platforms like DoorDash, which is very different than my assumption. And I think a lot of people in the food systems world know aggregators to be. So online platforms certainly play an important role, but in my mind, aggregation. Um, and an aggregator is anyone who's working with multiple producers to then offer a diverse products to buyers, um, which is a certain definition of a food hub. But I think some really good examples of aggregators in particular in New Hampshire is Local Foods Plymouth in New Hampshire, in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Their model is one that they provide an online ordering platform. Their farms go on and say what they have available. Consumers go on and essentially reserve and purchase, create like a shopping cart of what local foods they'd like to buy that week. The farms then find out what was sold and drop off at this central location. Um, they then have, employees to organize people's essentially shopping bags, and people go up and pick up their groceries, their local food once a week. Um, and I can speak in a minute to why that might be just slightly different than and a little bit more of a traditional larger scale food hub. Another example of an aggregator is a local harvest is based out of or sells predominantly to the Concord area of New Hampshire. And that's an agricultural cooperative. So that's actually 6 farms that have formed their own business entity. They are also their individual businesses and can go on and do their own sales in different ways they want. But they have all come together and formed this umbrella organization, an agricultural cooperative, in order to supply a CSA. So they have, I believe, over 300 CSA participants and members in different parts of around and surrounding Concord. They then participate in a really intricate model of creating bids for each of those farms equitably contribute to the CSA throughout the harvest season. So they're an aggregator in the way that they are, again, aggregating the product from 6 different farms, so that they can offer a CSA of a more diverse product than they might be able to individually, because they might be working with someone that grows fruit more, or certain soils grow, certain veggies in larger production than others. So they're working cooperatively to aggregate their product. Lastly, one that came to mind, and it's less so on the direct to consumer end, a little bit more on the wholesale distribution end, is Farm Connects, who is an aggregator in their own way up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And they essentially are a local food, they provide local food freight services to producers. So in a sense, they help aggregate product in cold storage. They then take it upon themselves to load up their trucks with orders and distribute. But I think they are fulfilling that aggregation role really well. Does anyone have any questions about that?
What was the name of that place again?
The last one
Yes.
was Farm Connects.
Home Connects. That's a great idea.
Food Connects,
It's
not Farm Connects, right?
Um, actually,
Is
no.
it
So
Farm
not to
Connect?
be confused with Food Connects in
Okay.
Brattleboro, Vermont.
Okay.
There's Farm Connects, Connex, which is very confusing, based out of Hardwick, Vermont. Um, and they are, yeah, strictly freight services. So they don't pay they don't make the sales connections. A producer can basically make a sale to a restaurant and then hire Farm Connects just to bring the product from point A to point B. So there's endless models out there. So so hang on
Hmm.
tight as we're gonna be talking a lot about a lot of different ones. Um, the next is food hubs, which again come in all different shapes and sizes. But to me, the real difference between an aggregator and a food hub is a food hub really takes it upon themselves and prioritizes um, the aggregation, but then its driving force is the marketing and sales of these products. So they take it upon themselves. They are building in their business model that next step of making those connections, whereas an aggregator may not, that might not be their strength or driving force behind their business model. And so a primary example of this is Food Connects in Brattleboro, Vermont. They work with over 125 producers in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Western Massachusetts. And they post the products that are available on an online platform. They work with wholesale buyers then, largely in schools, but also all kinds of wholesale buyers. And they are, they have a sales team that are driving those sales for those producers. And in exchange, there's a markup for that product to help with the marketing and sales and distribution and storage and all those kind of middle of the supply chain services that they provide. Some other big names that might ring a bell for people that are kind of really cleanly fall within this food hub category is Boston Food Hub and Farm Fresh Rhode Island are two of kind of the bigger regional food hubs. Um, in New Hampshire, we are unique in that we don't have necessarily these bustling kind of distribution warehouse-based food hubs. Um, we predominantly, our food hubs take the shape of retail spaces. And I think that's for a number of different reasons. Distribution is extremely expensive and often inefficient in rural places. If you're doing distribution, you need a lot of buyers in a small area, which usually is in urban places. Um, You also need the farms operating at a certain scale that can feed into a wholesale distribution based food hub. Whereas what we know about New Hampshire farms is that there's a lot of them, but they tend to be very small. Um, so as far as price points being viable for farms feeding into kind of more wholesale, traditional food hubs, what we have found is that this kind of retail model is looking to be more successful in New Hampshire. So examples are Taproot Marketplace up in Lancaster, New Hampshire, Fresh Start Farms in Manchester, the Sweet Beet Market or Kearsarge Food Hub. And funny enough, Sarah's on this tonight because I was thinking of you as I was writing this as this farm stop model, which is becoming more popular and people trying to bring the farm stop model to New England, which essentially is kind of providing a retail space for a number of producers. And Sarah could probably talk way more about that model than I could. So. Um,
if there's a time during this you want me to explain a little bit more what the farm stop model
Sure.
is, I'm
You
happy
want to
to.
provide like a little overview?
Sure. So we, first of all, I'll qualify that what we're developing here as we go through the leeway we've been given to do some of the research into it through the grant that we got, was looking at what the farm stop model is, which comes out of Ann Arbor, Michigan specifically. There is a group there that their retail aggregation distribution comes under the umbrella, or their what they've developed is called Argus Farms Stop. They are retail markets that are very farm forward. They're values driven. They are kind of playing what I think is a major, they're filling a gap that we see a lot of the times, which is that they're providing the convenience of a grocery store, but the direct to customer relationship of the farmer's market. And it really is meant to uh, have that connection be right up to that sale. So that's what I was saying before, that what's really important to me about the model that we're developing is that it follows that particular side of it, that the customer in that store recognizes that they're buying direct from the farmer or from the vendor. The big thing that Argus does that's kind of unique to them is that they have created a very effective way of using a consignment model, which traditionally, from both sides, has been considered maybe not a very easy model to work with. Consignment can involve a lot of risk for the farmer. The wholesale purchase as a store means that you're buying up front. The person who has that product knows they've made that sale. They're hopefully comfortable with what that wholesale price is. Um, if it's on consignment, especially if it's fresh produce, there's a lot of possible loss in what you're selling. So it's sort of which side takes the risk on that. Um, the farm stop model in Michigan, they've really developed systems where within their retail markets, they have so much very functional inventory management and so much communication with their farmers. They work with local vendors, and so they start from the crop planning all the way through to that end sale to really similar to what you were saying in the co-op, the six farm co-op. They are trying to figure out across that year how to balance out what people are able to sell through those markets. And then they also do wholesale purchasing. So they supplement what they have in their stores with purchasing maybe more regionally at a sort of a straight wholesale sort of interaction. And it's sort of this funny thing where you're like, well, what's rocket science about that? It's sort of, it feels like a regular store in a lot of ways, but to me, it's this sort of trust-based model where everybody's very engaged and invested in it from the beginning to the end. And what we're doing, which is a little different than what they are, is we're going to build it out on a membership model that's more like a co-op really, but is collective marketing. The farm stop model has relied on sort of a 70-30, which is traditionally like a very good wholesale price point for a vendor. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 60-40. 70-30 is sort of, if especially as a produce farmer, if you can get that, that's a really nice number. They tried 80-20 and it didn't function for them in terms of their finances. Taproot also sort of was walking that line, trying to figure out what that percentage would mean within their businesses. But neither of them have tried more of this member engagement investment on the ownership end of it. And, there's a whole bigger conversation to have about co-op ownership versus this cooperative ownership or collaborative ownership. We're right in the middle of sort of navigating what all of that means. What are equity shares where the vendor's getting something back? What's just an engagement based on the tiers of how much product you have in the store. That means, your shelf fee is this amount, your annual fee is this amount, and what people can withstand. So we're doing a lot of conversations around that right now with the farmers and figuring out what makes sense. There's freezer space, fridge space, pantry space. This is all stuff the Farm Stop model has been looking at too. So there's a lot of resources from them. Um, if anybody's interested in what they do, there's actually a How to Start a Farm Stop book that's out in the world that people can get, and they offer like an online school. It's really, really appropriate for a little bit more of a bigger co-op building out than what we're doing, but it has a lot of really relevant information. So yeah, it's there's a lot of nuances in it, and we're creating one that's that is unique to our location and scale. But what Caitlin said about New Hampshire being so unique in its own way, that these are small scale vendors, there's not a lot of bigger wholesale producers, and everybody gets a little bit stuck, except for, there are those out there. But in terms of what we consider, especially in kind of this community of what scale people are farming at, it doesn't really suit that bigger wholesale model. So just trying to find some smaller ways to do that that offer more values engagement than a traditional on-farm store. And I think that's at the heart of what the Farm Stop model is, and we're just trying to create some nuance around it.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, it's
The other thing
complex.
I'll
Like,
say is that just really quickly, and maybe we'll go into it later, but especially with Mike on the call, the ability of a farm stop or a farm store like this that is aggregating product anyways from multiple farms has the potential of being able to coordinate with something like the Farms to Schools projects to say this, if there's ordering happening in one space, even though we're not a big aggregator, there could be ways with Farm to School to coordinate that kind of aggregation.
Yeah, it seems to like meet well with the idea of the farmer collaborative idea where all these small farms that might be producing just say lettuce, but they don't produce enough for a school could come together and then, be able to sell to like a school, with the amounts of lettuce that they each have. And that could be done through this collaborative model.
Yeah, I really see a place for something like for the restaurants or for something like a farm to school program that if it were done well, and ours would be a micro of something that would have to be bigger to do this at a scale, but that the place for online ordering wouldn't be for the customer coming into the store. I think that person is a retail environment and they're shopping in the store. But for something like a restaurant or an institution like Farm to School, there could be a platform connected to those farmers, and then the administration on the back end that's supported by the members, which could be a restaurant member and a Farm to School. Like there could be support coming into it to support that administration, could help with ordering on those particular pieces. I think that might be a really nice way to balance out the two things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much interrelated, and then once you start investing in services of one, it might make sense to expand your offerings to other markets. And yeah, that's one thing what I love about food hubs is they are so particularly specific to a certain set of problems that are trying to be solved. So, and I just want to speak to maybe earlier I was kind of referring to two different types of food hubs, so kind of like subcategories. So one is that kind of typical trucks on the road, distribution based. There's a sales team that's working out of most of the time a warehouse with big walk-in coolers and where they aggregate and store product. But is mostly invisible to the consumer, right? It's in the huge warehouse somewhere out there, and a truck comes back and backs up to a loading dock in a food co-op and offloads its goods. Whereas that retail model, still a food hub because they are working with a diverse number of products and producers to fill out that retail store. But that is their outlet for sales is that they're providing that brick and mortar for the farms that they work with rather than providing that warehouse and trucking services. So the consumer comes to the retail space as opposed to the distribution meets the buyer elsewhere. So I just wanted to distinguish that. Um, and lastly, we'll talk a little bit about distributors, which there's so many, and they're also have their own set of rules and their own set of producers that they work with. But so distributors are going to be essentially um, just playing that role. And I think where distributors gets distinguished from food hubs often is the amount of local, either the amount of local that they prioritize. Food hubs tends to be, maybe a nonprofit organization, but really mission driven to move local food. Distributors could mean that they prioritize local, but oftentimes that, they're broadline distributors that are not prioritizing a certain region's food. But that being said, I think the other distinguishing factor in my mind between food hub and distributor is distributor has volume. Distributors are offering typically at a very large scale. Um, they have immense diversity of products. They have a very wide geographic reach in their distribution area. Um, Often, all of New England or all of the Northeast or all of the East Coast, the whole country, things they're operating at a much different scale than food hubs typically are. Some examples of people who are kind of walking the line of food hubs to distributors in New England. I think, Black River Produce, while they don't source all regional foods, they do move millions and millions of dollars of regional based product. So they walk that line. Native Maine is another one. Works with a lot of New England based growers. Crown of Maine is another one. Distributes, all across New Hampshire, all across New England. Upper Valley Produce is also someone I consider as a distributor. Does a lot of distribution in New Hampshire, definitely works with New Hampshire producers, but sort of operates at that larger scale and isn't necessarily prioritizing local. Again, they're going to be moving a lot of non-local foods. Other distributors in the area that are doing a good amount of local, Marty's Local out of Massachusetts, Myers Produce based out of Vermont, Vermont Roots based out of Northern Vermont. Northern Atlantic Naturals is kind of a larger scale distributor, but they do source and work with a lot of New England based growers. And I don't want to overwhelm people with names. I have more, but just know that there are a lot of trucks on the road. Those are the sort of smaller scale distributor lists that I put together, and then we're talking about really the broad line, larger scale things like Albert's Organics, which is a local program through UNFI, comes to mind. Thurston Foods, Baldor, trucks that we see on the road probably when you're on the highway. Costa, Favorite Foods, Gordon, PFG, Cisco, things like that. It's not these um, distributors in particular are ones that I do know have worked with New England-based growers, so it is possible. But they are going to be working with those who can provide a pretty large volume to satisfy their wholesale buyers' needs. So everyone that I just mentioned, I do know has at least had a history of working with some regional growers. Again, probably not prioritizing local over national or international foods, but have successfully worked with local producers. And Teresa asked me a question of how can farmers work with these distributors? And that's a really great question. I think every single one of them is probably going to be a little bit different. I do think most of them start with cold calling. Um, and probably for the larger of a company they are, the lengthier of an onboarding process it's going to be. And this is where really having your paperwork ducks in a row would pay off. Um, so again, it's kind of a game of knowing your scale and knowing the scale that you're going to be able to supply into, and knowing what amount of work up front is worth it to you. Um,
But you now have the wholesale booklet you're putting together, which is a way to help make these connections.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, so that's a perfect segue um, into wholesale readiness and the wholesale directory, which we've developed over the last couple years at the Food Alliance in partnership with the Department of Ag, Markets, and Food. Um, and I think I'll just kind of breeze through some of the, or all of the traits that we have boiled down into what we believe is wholesale readiness. And we require of the producers, the farms and food businesses that are featured and listed in this directory. So in order to be in this directory, producers have a willingness to work with wholesale buyers and a knowledge of their needs. They maintain liability insurance. They are able to provide bulk volumes and or case sizes and wholesale volume pricing, which I can speak a little bit more to that in a minute. They also have appropriate legally compliant and professional packaging and labeling, which is its own set of laws and regulations. Um, they know their food business's FSMA status, which stands for the Food Safety Modernization Act, a whole set of food safety laws and regulations. They use verified food safety standards and record keeping systems, and they operate within compliance of all applicable laws and regulations that pertain to their food operation. Um, and lastly, if have they developed an ordering process and a way for wholesale buyers to access your product through distribution, whether it's working with a food hub or distributor or self-distribution? Just have you kind of thought through those systems of when a chef picks up the phone and wants to order your apples, do you have an Excel spreadsheet already made for, to plug in their order? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be an expensive online ordering platform, but like, have you thought through those systems of how the product is going to be ordered and then get to a buyer? So that's kind of, we've kind of distilled those over the last couple years. We believe that those kind of 6 traits are what it kind of takes to do wholesale. And I don't say this by any means to be intimidating or daunting, but unfortunately, taking your product to wholesale does take a little bit extra work up front. And then the hope is, that once you are in the door of a wholesale producer or a wholesale buyer or a distributor, it could be worth if you could, move the volume that you're wanting to move. Um, but that being said, I think I'll just loop back around a little bit to the pricing need is that I think one of my main, if were to leave like a takeaway for anyone tonight is that, wholesale is definitely not a good fit for everyone. And I think and that's totally okay. And in fact, it's not a good fit for a lot of New Hampshire growers. And so really knowing uh, your price point and kind of doing that little extra homework in the off season to know your bottom line is going to really help determine what market avenues are best for you. Um, you know, and that's going to help determine whether farmers market or a farm stand or a CSA might be a better model, or if you really can, because it is such a difference in price point that you get, it has to be gained by the volume that you can sell. Um, so there's a little bit of finesse there to really know your numbers intimately inside out. Um, and I think there's a reason why, there isn't a lot of wholesale outlets in New Hampshire, because if there was, that demand for those businesses would be here, and providing those services. So I think it's um, good for us to have kind of a finger on the pulse of like what's working here, and that there's probably a reason why we predominantly have retail outlets, offering sales outlets for New Hampshire farms. Yeah, Sarah.
I was just going to say, along with that, there's just the consideration of what kind of farm you want to be or see yourself as, in terms
Hmm.
of, are you growing more of a few crops or fewer of more diversity? And I think, like,
Hmm.
in the scale of farming a lot of people in these communities are doing, there feels to me, especially in like what are some positive movements in local agriculture in terms of people starting smaller scale farms, that they are focused on maybe more intensive, diversified production, which does
Hmm.
not lend itself to
Right.
having, like, Beth, I think I didn't hear you say what types of products you're thinking of, but if you work with Hannafords, often when somebody asked us to work with Hannafords, it was like, are you willing to convert, this large part of what's not a large growing area necessarily to begin with, the way we do it, into just iceberg lettuce, or romaine
Hmm.
lettuce,
Hmm.
and pack in cases of 12 and get, however many cases to Hannaford's with your GAP certification or the next
Hmm.
GAP certification. And that was not the way that we, just in terms of all the reasons of life, we're wanting to farm. And there's so many different temperaments and desires and ways people want to be on their land. So that's a big reason too, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That the wholesale really does dictate the land management in a lot of ways. Um, and like Sarah said too, distributors are often going to have requirements that often make sense for larger farms to dedicate the labor to have these kind of extra certifications like GAP. It's a big process to go through, but again, if you're a wholesale and your goal is to really sell big volumes, it's worth that extra labor. For small farms, it's often not. Things like third-party audits or HACCP plans, these kind of intimidating processes, again, are going to be worth it, and can be built into that bottom line of a larger scale producer. Um, and so those are some of the things that distributors might be looking for. Again, and it's something I'm interested in, and the Hampshire Food Alliance might be interested in. Even we've discussed about um, how do we do some of that research about what distributors have worked with New Hampshire-based producers, and like what are the standards, what is the paperwork that they look for, what are the kind of hoops that you have to jump through, and can we kind of try to help distill some of those, and even put it within the wholesale directory to kind of help provide some of that information so that it's not so intimidating. Something that we have on the back burner, in the back of our minds. um,
There's another level in there as well, especially for organic producers
mhm.
and distributors. Um, Not necessarily for aggregators, depending on what type of aggregator they are, but for a distributor to be able to distribute or certified organic product, they also have to have a certification
Mhm.
to be able to handle that product and know what the regulations are for that, unless the product itself is in a retail ready package. But a lot of times when you're working with distributors, it's a bulk product, like it's a case of lettuce in a
Mhm.
bag in a wax box. Well, if that's the case, because it's not sealed and retail ready, that distributor or aggregator, depending on if they're moving product out and around, also have to have a
Mhm.
certification for handling.
Mhm.
So there's like another level in there too that got created in 2024
Yeah,
that we
for
all have to deal
organickers.
with for
Hmm.
certified producers. Yeah,
Totally.
if it's an aggregator, that's a retail store that is going to the consumer, the end consumer,
Mhm.
that handling certification isn't needed. But yeah, there's that other, like all those little things, and that's one of them.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Specifically for organic growers.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then lastly for distribution, one thing Teresa asked me about was if distributors often have on-farm pickup versus farmers needing to drop off at certain locations. And unfortunately, the best answer I have is that it all depends. It's gonna vary per distributor. And I think it's largely going to depend on their pre-established routes and how close you are to them, and the kind of volume that you're moving through them. So I think they're going to be incentivized if they can pick up a large load and move it somewhere. But it's not necessarily going to be efficient for them to be going to a lot of different farms and picking up small amounts. In which case, I assume that the larger distributors have like distribution centers and they have sort of a hub network of their own, right? It can't all be in one location. So I can imagine there's situations where drop-offs are happening if they're efficient for producers. But it's certainly another thing to take into account.
Yes, where you need these different size circles of the aggregation, and we really don't have that right now or anymore, or have it because like we're saying, the scale is, if you can get a bunch of farms to maybe share picking up from each other in order to create an order of a product that's big enough to go to a wholesaler. But can you do that without being a co-op yourselves that's saying under this one name that has such and such certification of our growing practices? It gets very complicated when you're trying to cross stock with someone from all the different farms and those regulations are or aren't met. But it feels like without different regions in New Hampshire having those existing, you have to really like recreate it in a small community and then bring that to the next place. And I think that has slowed things down. And I just don't see really each individual farm wanting to get bigger into that one role themselves. Like it requires that warehousing to do it, to let those farms still operate the way that they're operating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Teresa, I don't know if you want to add anything or you want to move on to some of the discussion questions.
Yeah, let's move on to some of the discussion. I think this is a great time to start thinking in the back of our minds how New Hampshire can start to build what you're talking about, Sarah, with this is great with your collaborative model, but how farmers can also be collaborative together because a lot of us are so small that we can't grow to meet the need of even one school necessarily or a hospital or, for distribution. So, and I guess these are questions for the generality, not necessarily they relate to food hubs, aggregators and stuff, but how can small farmers better coordinate to strengthen local and organic farming within the local food system in New Hampshire? What can farmers be doing? Um, there's the bigger picture I think of as, aggregators and things like that, but what kind of mindset should a farmer have? If they're looking for this type of, collaboration.
Mhm. Yeah, I can speak to my own experience of farming in New Hampshire. I think one of the ways that we address that, it really seemed to start with befriending the farms that were immediately around us, and figuring out how we could support each other. It seems like everyone is learning this lesson of, the more diverse products we can offer the consumer that stops into our farm stand or subscribes to our CSA, um, the more successful you're going to be, right? Because you're preventing them from then going and getting their bread here and their cheese here, and you're kind of making that extra step for them. Um, so I just see that happening already all over New Hampshire. I think farms are good at that. Um, and I think there's always room for more of that. Um, supporting the farms immediately around you. If you're a diversified vegetable farmer, can you sell some frozen chicken or frozen lamb as as an add-on to your CSA? Can you build out your farm store so that you have meats and cheeses and breads and other things to try to get some more foot traffic and support the other farms, so you can kind of start creating that more of a web and kind of these reliable hubs, so to speak, to not confuse the language, where people can reliably, stop in and get their dinner's worth of ingredients.
Mhm.
But I'm sure there's a million different ways. I don't know if anyone else has any other ideas.
Well, I'll just say that one of the things we're doing in the Seacoast is trying to really keep some consistent farmer to farmer meetups going that are both social to sort of decompress about what's going on in each other's everything, but also really to look kind of more strategically at these issues and say, okay, if right now it's not happening at a bigger scale or we're not interested necessarily in like what that means, how amongst ourselves can we communicate to help each other at each other's farm stands? So there really is this like micro macro because we now within that list, it's just a listserv amongst ourselves. You might say, I have extra of this week. Does anyone need it for their CSA or their farm store? So there's sort of that
Cool.
space or forum in order to have those conversations. And then within that, a couple of farms who do bigger things or who supplement with going to Brookdale and getting fruit. And there's not a lot of possibility for us at our markets always to get, we have our blueberries and raspberries, but if we wanted peaches and apples and everything, that's not what our farm does. And Brookdale can be a great place to get that, but are we all going there? And so within that small farmer to farmer group, a couple of people have said, hey, we're going back and forth, so let's do that just within this. And then that has the capacity to maybe some of those people want to grow that a little bit bigger and say, well, can we, let's say, Mike, like if you were connected into that, say, oh, there's a group of farmers within this radius um, that we could do a kind of DIY version of what those food hubs were. It can be really inefficient. When those groups stick together, you're sort of walking this line of how much administration versus just communication. And that just happens over and over again.
Yep. It takes a lot of coordination.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Mhm.
That sounds great. Sounds, Sarah, like it's kind of the reverse of a distributor. Instead of the distributor coming and picking up, the farmers are getting together to say, hey, I'm going, I have room. I'll pick up for everybody else and bring it back. You come to me and pick it up. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean, for years and
fantastic.
years, everybody's been trying to say to each other, who's closer to whom? Like if two people, if a couple people are picking up from Vernon, like, can you pick it up and we'll bring it back to Sarah's, and then Sarah's is closer to these others, so you don't have to drive as far each time. But again, like Caitlin said, the communication for that is a lot, and who has room in their small, some people are doing Honda Fit, food deliveries versus a refrigerated truck, and you just get into that scale issue again. Once you try to,
Yeah.
I did that with, another farmer who had a van, sort of like a family van. But even that, if I ended up with too much, it didn't really work to coordinate that. So then you end up in two
Mhm.
cars anyways.
Mhm.
Because I think there's so much benefit to being able to come pick up from the farmer, of course, but that's one of the hardest things to figure out.
Right. Right. Yeah. When you have to drive an hour and a half to one way,
Right.
it in the lives of busy farmers, it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's where those brick and mortars, I think, play such a role. And if you can get that, if you know it's an outlet that's going to serve, so you have your farmer's market and you have that, or maybe it's enough for that is where your market is. I think of all the farmer's market vendors who don't have another outlet and they don't know where to tell their customer during the week, you can find me here.
Hmm.
So the more we can help do that, I think it'll be
Hmm.
beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous model because, I've heard from customers going, I can never get to the market between 9 and noon on
Mhm.
Saturday or
Right.
Friday evening or whatever because I work all that time.
Yeah.
And, my daughters have the same, they live down in Nashua, the market's in the afternoon. Well, they all work and they can't get there and they want to, but to have that place to go that they're going to see a lot of the same products is fabulous. It's a way to extend that farmers market
Yeah.
and benefit the consumers and the farmers. So,
Yeah.
so I have another question is with the few minutes we have left, is how can ag organizations like Nova New Hampshire do to support and strengthen local and organic food systems and farming and how can we help, with what you're doing, Sarah, and maybe some other places on to help build this up in New Hampshire?
Feel like I'm the only one talking here. Beth, did you want to pipe in on anything?
Yeah, is there any like particular forms of support that you feel like would be helpful, Beth?
Oh, are you asking me?
Mhm.
Actually, the wholesale directory seems like it would be a huge help. And I was wondering if you could tell me, is it online somewhere?
Yeah, it is. I'll drop a link to it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What are you growing, Beth?
Um, just right now, I'm just vegetables. I don't really have a good spot right now that's protected from the animals, to tell you the truth. So I've been working down at the community garden, and my property is just overrun by, deers, mice, mole, voles, woodchucks, you name it, we've got it. So I need to have another location to be able to grow seriously.
Mhm.
But I did just put in some more apple trees, peach, plum, apricot a couple years ago. So yeah, I've got some old apple trees and pear trees on the property, but yeah, it would be really cool to have an orchard that really produced and then be able to have a place to do cold storage. So that's a something I would be looking into. Where could I cold store, or would I have to build my own facility to do cold storage? I work at a Footprints food pantry. And so I am used to going in the walk-in cooler. And I know they're pretty expensive, but if you plan ahead well enough, maybe you could do an outbuilding with a food cooler in the basement, possibly. So, so I guess that's what I'm thinking of, but it would kind of be really nice if I could sell, like if I have apple crop, apple and pears and peaches, if I could sell those to a place that has the cold storage. Then I wouldn't have to make my own cold
Mhm.
storage.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I have a
Yeah.
that's
two-hundred-year-old house. What is kind of fascinating that my 200-year-old house, I think it was built intentionally with a high water table. So, it's always cold down there. And I know they probably did a really good job storing their summer crops down in the basement that I have right now. But we have the rodents tend to get in, so
Mhm.
I can't store them in my own basement because they just keep coming in. We've had to hire a pest control company to try to find where they're coming in and
Mhm.
spray foam, but I need a secure cold storage.
Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep. And
that's
there
good.
are, some food hubs who have um, found that need with the producers that they work with, that the producers might not have the capacity they need to scale up, although they have the desire to scale up. So the food hubs can actually provide some of that cold storage space, frozen freezers, storage space, dry storage space for a small fee. Um,
Yeah, I would say that's like the next for us. Like we don't have, even with what we're growing as a food hub, with the other parts, pieces of the puzzle, with the, the commercial kitchen and the house and everything, there's not a footprint to build in the kind of aggregation cold storage that's needed. We've
Mhm.
looked a little bit at like building in actually, like doing a bermed, basically
Oh,
a root
nice.
cellar, but cold storage that
Hmm.
would have pallet access. So you could say to different farms, you can do apple storage here or rent carrot storage space here
Hmm. Hmm.
down the road. But I think, yeah, that's a major stumbling block. And then if the place you're getting it to can only take a certain amount, you're really stuck in the middle there. Um, so yeah, Beth, that's a big concern always.
Hmm.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
we're almost at time. So, unless there's a last minute questions anybody had or a topic to bring up, I'm going to let everybody go and let you know that the next roundtable is March 7th. And no, it's not March 7th. The winter conference is March 7th. The next roundtable is going to be in March. And I got to look that up because I did not put that in my notes. It's the 17th and it's at 6:30. It's going to be oh, that's in March. I'm so sorry. I don't know what month I'm in. It's February is the next one, and it is the 17th as well. So we have both 17th in the February and 17th in March. And then the winter conference is the 7th. And I hope that we'll see you either at the roundtable and or the winter conference. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
coming tonight.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
Thanks for
you.
Thank
putting this
you.
together. Nice to meet you, Beth and
Okay.
Mike.
It's
Bye.
been really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you,
wonderful,
Beth.
Beth.